Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the
the
interview.
Today we are joined by Siska. Is it Jourdain or both are you? Because you've got two names there, Siska. I'm a bit confused there.
It's Jordan. That's my
Jordan.
married name.
Yeah, Jordan. Okay, yeah. So Siska Jordan, from Mpumalanga, representing the Democratic Alliance. So Siska, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you and about, I guess, your home province of Mpumalanga, could you give us a little brief description of both just before we get into the questions?
Yeah. Well, I'm 33 years old. I'm from the province of Mpumalanga. My hometown is called Secunda. That's where I was born and raised. I spent some time in high school in Saudi Arabia when my family moved there. Came back to South Africa for my university life. And then from there, I just sort of fell in love and moved into South African politics. And Mpumalanga, I mean, the slogan of the province is that it's the province of the rising sun. It's one of the most beautiful provinces in South Africa. It's one of the more northern provinces with the gateway to the Kruger National Park. The landscape there is very vast. So you would find some very rural towns, but also more urban areas. The constituency that I serve is a very rural one with mainly farms, farming communities, and then small towns that are not urban at all in the area. Yeah, and I guess my hometown is famous for the Sasol refinery that's located there. So it's one of the largest petrochemical refineries in the Southern Hemisphere, if not, I think the largest one. So of course, everybody that I know had some sort of, yeah. So my father worked there, my husband has worked there. It's very much sort of ingrained in the culture of that town.
Mm. And I guess especially a lot of rural towns in South Africa, there's a lot of refinery and mining sort of industries there, and they are quite crucial to the South African economy. And I know we were talking to one of your colleagues, I think Chris Hutting, on Monday, and he was talking about especially in the Northwest Province where he represents. There's a big problem now with a lot of the gold mines, especially running out of actual minerals in the mines. So a lot of the key industries in those sort of rural towns are really starting to drop off, and it's a pretty big problem, especially for your hometown, especially if that is the case.
Yeah, well, Sasol has so they've done really good projections in terms of that, and started taking sort of correctional steps to try and add to the sustainability of the company over a really long period of time. So they also started looking into gas. I guess they also are responsible for a really large export of coal, and South Africa's electricity really runs on coal. So they've looked into a lot of different ways. They also have engagements with other countries, and so I mean, I hope for the sustainability of the town and the people there that that's not the case. But yeah, it is a reality in South Africa. I guess a lot of communities really rely on mining.
Exactly. And I'm guessing you don't live back in your hometown that you grew up in even now, Cisco. I guess you've probably moved on from where you've previously grew up.
Yeah, so I moved to Cape Town in 2022 to work at the DA's federal head office before being elected. And now I'm sort of between the two places, not specifically in Secunda. My constituency is actually a few hours drive from Secunda, where I grew up. But I'm in between the two places as my work requires.
I see. Yeah. So then we might as well, I guess, move on to our questions for you, Siska. So my first question to you is, how was your high school and university life, and do you have any memorable moments? And I can kind of pick up from your accent that you have spent a bit of time like overseas. It's not your very typical South African accent.
Yeah. So as I said, I started off in Secunda. I have many memorable moments there, particularly of the friends that I still have to this day. This is also where I met my husband. He was in a proper garage band with my brother when we were in high school. And many of my childhood friends are still my friends today. In grade 10, or I guess what's year 10 in Australia, my family moved to Saudi Arabia, which was really a life-changing experience for me in many ways. Besides adjusting to a place that's just naturally, culturally, and customarily so different to where I came from, I got to actually meet so many people from all over the world. I was in an American international school, which I think was really conducive to just opening my mind in so many ways, coming from a town where, as I've mentioned, many people grow up in a very specific way. I think that really opened my mind and gave me a lot of ambitions for the future. Particularly memorable from there, well, I stayed 2 hours drive away from my high school, and every day, before the sun almost comes up, which is really early in Saudi Arabia, but we would get on the bus and we would take the bus to school. And those 2 hours and the people that I spent them with there were really some of the most memorable memories from high school. So yeah, I guess those are university life. I went to university in Pretoria. That also had its own. It's really a time of discovering yourself and understanding who you are, and just putting almost all of your efforts and your thoughts into what you want to do with your future. So of course that has its own moments with it. And I got to reunite with my friends and my brother after being in Saudi Arabia for almost 3 years. So that was a really, really special time for me as well.
So you completed your high school education basically. You finished high school, I guess, in Saudi Arabia, and I guess in the sense that, was there any key differences you found between the Saudi Arabian international schooling system and maybe the South African national schooling system that you figured out since you've experienced both?
Yeah, I mean, in the school that I came from in Secunda, had a really strong focus on mathematics, science, technology, all these different kind of trade, subjects, if you can, like electrical, mechanical, those kind of things.
Really,
of
really
course,
the refinery in that sense.
that produces people who are interested in like engineering or
Yeah.
very specific. Whereas but that's specific to the school where I came from, though. It can be different in other schools. In Saudi Arabia, I went to an American international school, so the system was completely different. The way that your schooling is set up sort of gives you exposure to so many different kind of electives, where in South Africa, you only select your electives in grade 9, where you'll start grade 10, 11, 12 with some core subjects, and then you'll choose kind of a direction between, different career opportunities that you might pursue one day.
Streams.
Where the American system is very sort of focused on giving you exposure to a variety, and then, sort of closer to grade 11 or grade 12, you might decide where you want to specialize. You can say that, yeah. So, I mean, that was really critical to me. Something that was really different and, sort of a positive thing in the American system also is the guidance counselors that they have at schools. There's also a strong focus on physical education, where in South Africa, you would pursue sports. Team sports is a massive thing. Of course, rugby.
Big cricket.
But, so those are things that are really just part of our being. But it's kind of separate from your education. So it forms part of schooling, but it's something that you might get into just because you're interested in it. While in the American system, we had physical education, we had we could choose different kind of levels of that. Did you want to pursue dance or yoga? So I guess I got a lot of exposure into different things, and that helped me decide what are the things that I'm interested in. And it also actually had a really pretty big impact on what I ended up pursuing in life one day.
I see, Siska. And I guess in a sense as well, those sort of experiences that you had in Saudi Arabia in terms of, experiencing different sort of things really did help you, I guess. And I'm not 100% sure, did you really have your eyes set on maybe becoming a politician at that young age, or was it really just all in the or came along maybe in university and later on in life?
Yeah, it really started later on in life. I guess in high school you become aware of what you might be good at. And so I had a lot of interest in a lot of things that I liked. I really liked language classes, for example, in comparison to some others, even though I grew up with like a really strong focus on you must, be proficient in mathematics and science and those kind of basic things. So I was very much in between two places, whether I wanted to, go into engineering or something similar, because that's kind of what many of my friends and family ended up doing and becoming. Or whether I wanted to pursue some of my interests. I really, I took up debate in high school. I really liked that. Some, other, I'm just trying to think of like, what were the, drama kind of, those things were not necessarily, immediately a decision of like, this is what I wanted to do, but I became aware of like, these are the things that I like and appreciate, and that I might be good at. And so I thought of studying occupational therapy, studying law. But I ended up deciding in my first year of university, I think I want to do psychology. I think I want to become a psychologist. And I remember in my first class, we were 1,500 students in the year taking that first year psychology class. And the lecturer says, look at the two people next to you. It's likely that 2 out of the 3 of you won't be here by the 3rd year. And it really was that way. In my 3rd year, we were about 400 students. And following that, only 65 end up, moving on to the later stage. And then only 10 from that university are selected to actually study their masters. And so that became something that was just very difficult for me to pursue. Not necessarily because of selection, but also because, at some point you need to start, living your life. And South African, I guess Afrikaans cultures are also very, my parents sort of raised me to become independent at a certain stage, and then it's expected of you, to go out into the world and make something of your life, and that just, so it wasn't really practical for me to continue with that. So I guess in university, it was again a time of sort of exploring what you wanted to do in life. So I studied philosophy, psychology, French language, and only afterwards I ended up volunteering for the DA because I hadn't found a job yet and I wasn't really sure where to go from here. And yeah, that's how I became
It's just
involved.
history,
And
basically.
yeah. So I guess it was a place and a space for me to practice, everything that I felt I was good at, everything that I wanted to contribute to, my country or to the world. As a young person, you have really big ambitions. And it really gave me a platform to do that. So yeah.
And I guess in that sort of circumstances, it was really just a strange circumstance in the sense that, you didn't really know what exactly you were doing and you had quite a lot of time in your hands. So you decided maybe, volunteering and going out there, maybe join the Democratic Alliance could be something good to use your time, use some of your spare time at that point. And, look where it's turned up. I guess you're now a member of parliament for your local province that you grew up in. So it's quite incredible how some things can turn out and how, sometimes taking an opportunity can really lead you along in life and open up so many doors for yourself.
Absolutely. And yeah, I actually had a friend in my hometown who was a local councillor. So in South Africa, municipalities have sort of town councils that are quite large in comparison to what you might see, in the American political system or whatever. And my friend was a local councillor, and he said, "Well, just come with me, and let's knock on a few doors and see where this will take you." And yeah, that's exactly how it happened. So
Very interesting and I guess, a very uncommon sort of way to enter politics, Siska. But yes, we'll move on to our next question for you. So, after I did some research on you there, and I found out you actually a student teacher back in your hometown in Secunda for quite a short period of time. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the South African educational system? I think you did touch on this before, and what sort of insights can you share from your time as a student teacher back in your hometown?
well, when I was a university student, I worked for a short time in a school for children with autism because at that stage, like, I wanted to pursue psychology. And when I moved back to my hometown, I started working at a tutoring center for kids with learning inhibitions. And that's where it kind of moved a little bit more from, something sort of like behaviorally therapeutic to educational. And so when I completed my honors degree in psychology, I thought I'd just do a postgraduate certificate in education. Many students who graduate with a BA degree actually end up doing the PGCE, and there it has a practical component to it. So I spent 12 weeks in my hometown. I was actually doing 6 weeks of practical at the primary school that I attended as a child. And
This
then
were the
I
same
was
teachers there, or?
yeah. So
Oh,
and then I spent 6 weeks at a local high school, and these were really rewarding experiences. My school actually had the same principal as when I was a kid, and I remember just being a child. We loved this guy. We loved him so much. So when I was sitting in the teachers' lounge, with this principal sort of many of the teachers couldn't remember me actually, which is really sad because you have these core memories of them. And anyway, you just kind of walk up to them and you're like, "Hey, thank you for the contribution you made to my life," and they're like, "Oh, yes, you." So but some of them did actually remember me because their children were the same age as I was. And I mean, that was really just it was kind of closing a circle for me. It was really nice to be there. Of course, I gained a lot of insights regarding the trials and tribulations of being a teacher. And today I'm actually serving in the basic education portfolio. I'm the deputy spokesperson for the DA in Parliament for that. So it gave me a lot of understanding about what the average kid in my country goes through in terms of, the experiences that I have been exposed to, but also what schools were like, where I didn't attend. So I was really incredibly privileged to attend the schools that I did in my hometown. But many kids actually grow up in rural areas, or they end up going to schools that are incredibly under-resourced, that might be overpopulated. I don't know if you've read about South African schooling, but the situation is really quite dire for many schools in our country, and also for many children. And for them, school is a place of safety, security, stability. So I really think that kind of exposure sort of instilled in me a lot of empathy that I try to draw on in my work now. So yeah, I
I
guess
see.
Yeah.
Hmm. And in a sense, I'm guessing hopefully a lot of those teachers back when you went back to your primary school, they had good experiences with you. If they do remember anything, nothing too bad, I'm guessing, Siska.
Oh no, that's I thought I was a little bit of a teacher's pet in primary school, so thankfully, whoever remembered me only remembered good things. And I remember in my last day in my practicals, the principal actually did this little speech, and he'd gone through some effort, kind of talking to each of the student teachers before doing his speech in the teachers' lounge, wishing us well. And he came to me and he asked me, what am I doing? And at that time, I was already a local government councillor, actually. I was doing my practical simultaneously. And, throughout all of the 6 weeks, I've just been kind of around there, just assisting here and there, giving a class or two. So they didn't really put a lot of notice, didn't really notice me that much. But then when he started speaking to me and I told him, I'm actually from this school, I'm, trying to serve the town at this level. I'm also just trying to finish this qualification. He was really surprised, and yeah, it's always a good experience. The same school also happened to be a voting station in the ward that I was a councillor for. So every election I would be stationed at that school, and I would still see my pictures in the hallway with participating in the school play or whatever the case. So yeah, it's always lovely to draw back on those memories.
I guess it would be, and seeing those sort of how the school's grown and how it's developed over the years as well would be quite cool as well, because I actually live quite close to my primary school, and seeing it develop in a sense and things change is really cool to see. And I haven't been back there really for like 6 years, and it's changed so much. So I'm guessing for you, since it's been quite a long time as well, and going back to the polling stations during election time, probably back. I'm guessing there was a polling booth back in the 2024 South African election that you were probably stationed in there, maybe Cisco or.
No, I was stationed at our head office here in Cape Town. I
Oh.
was actually, yeah, I was actually part of a team manning social media and social media queries that comes into the DA. And yeah, so in 2024, no, but in 2021 is the last time that I was actually during an election there at that voting station. Yeah.
Okay. I'm guessing as well, obviously so many familiar faces going up to vote and that sort of thing. Seeing as I'm guessing Secunda is still probably quite a small town.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's small in comparison to one of our metros. So it's not a metro. It's not a metro, but yeah, it's a bit larger than some of the rural towns that I serve.
I see. Yeah, and I guess we'll move on then to our next question for you, Sisken. You did talk about this as well, but you did serve as a councillor for Govan Mbeki Council for 8 years. How was the transition from local government to federal politics, and what sort of differences have you seen from transitioning from local government to federal politics?
Well, while I was serving in local government, I was really privileged to serve in so many different portfolios and leadership positions locally and provincially before making my way to federal politics as a staff member in the DA's Leadership Development and International Office, and then as a member of parliament following the 2024 elections. So since my appointment to our federal head office here, my main focus have been developing public representatives and staff, and I particularly enjoyed, coordinating training activities for the party ahead of the 2024 election. The DA has an incredibly interesting campaign operation that we're very proud of. And I'm really grateful to have witnessed it and participated in it at that level. And I think working at our office really smoothed my transition into federal politics, because I got to work with DA politicians from across the country, from local mayors to high-profile individuals, some of whom have become ministers of national government today. So it's really made a huge difference in terms of my transition, and it's given me a deeper understanding of the party and South African politics at a national scale after serving only a town. So yeah, I think it's given me a lot of understanding in terms of my role in my caucus and all the associated protocols and procedures that are required at this level. And yeah, I think the transition has been a really interesting one. It's a bit of like a culture shock when you move into these spaces, but I think it's been a lot easier for me already knowing a lot of people working in this space.
Exactly. And one thing we do talk about a bit in Australian politics as well is the fact that there's a lot of politicians who come into parliament, whether that be state or federal parliament, and since they haven't had that experience in a political party in the political system, it's quite a shock straight away getting in. And I think in general, having a bit of political experience, whether that is working for another MP or working for the DA, for example, in South Africa, can really be important to building and honing those sort of skills so that when the time comes, you are ready to run for parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was a councillor, I've been lucky to serve my caucus as the caucus leader. So I led a group of councillors. We were about 16 people in total. And I did that for a few years. So it gave me a lot of experience in terms of strategic thinking and being able to establish a position on a number of issues at a local level. I was also involved in the Mpumalanga province in a leadership position. So I was the deputy chairperson of the province. I was the chairperson of what we call the Association for DA councillors in the province. So that's actually where my focus on training and development of public representatives started, because I really wanted to make an impact in terms of being able to do, to execute our duties, because the DA has been an opposition party for a very long time in other provinces than the Western Cape. And in 2021, actually, this started changing quite dramatically. And today we're a party of national government, which, sort of springs on you in a way if you don't look at developing individuals ahead of time so that they can become mayors and ministers and people in those kind of positions. So yeah, I guess it really did help a lot to have that experience.
And I'm guessing as well, when you were chairperson and the leader of the grouping of DA councillors within your local council, you're probably one of the youngest leaders of a council group in the whole of South Africa, seeing as that you were nearly on council for 8 years time, for 8 years actually. So I'm guessing you're probably in your early to mid-20s at that point. So that's probably quite historic.
Yeah. I was the youngest councillor in my council when I was appointed in 2015. I was 23 years old, and soon after I became the caucus whip. I was the youngest councillor in my caucus. That also has its challenges on its own. I'm a woman in politics, so yeah, that's one thing. But then also being the youngest person, amongst really experienced individuals. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily always call it challenging, but I've been surrounded by, mentors throughout, from the start, that I've been really privileged to meet. And that's really helped. But yeah, it's something that I'm very proud of. I was one of the youngest, but at the same time, at one stage you also move beyond that, and
Exactly. And I guess in a sense as well, it's probably something we don't see much in Australia, seeing as a lot of our MPs. I know in South African Parliament currently the youngest member of Parliament is 20 years old. And in Australia, I think our youngest that we have currently is 29. So it is quite a stark difference then, I think it goes to show how well I guess a lot of young people have been able to be engaged in politics in South Africa. I'm guessing there's still a lot who aren't engaged, but being able to get more young people, especially elected into Parliament, really does, widely represent the whole of South Africa. And I know the DA especially has been doing a very good job with this. We're getting a lot of young people like yourself, Siska, elected to Parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our core values is diversity, and the DA takes this very seriously. And it's not only in terms of racial diversity, which has really often been what our country is kind of defined by, but the party also puts a lot of effort into developing young people, ensuring that we have women within our ranks, really making sure that we are representatives of all the people in our country. We have the average age of South African MPs have actually dropped quite dramatically after the 2024 elections, where all of a sudden you see it's not only a room full of sort of older persons anymore, but also people who are still finding their way, but are able to resonate with people on the ground.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah. And being a parliament and being an elected official, you got to try and represent the people as much as possible. So having that sort of diversity, not always having a lot of older people and not necessarily always having a lot of younger people, and having a good mix of both is so crucial to being able to be a representative of democracy and represent the people that you are elected by and you are elected to represent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming up to our next question for you. Hang on, give me 2 secs. Yeah. So you represent Mpumalanga, a stronghold province in the past actually for the ANC. So as a DA member of Mpumalanga, what are some of the key initiatives and projects you hope to achieve for your province in the next 5 years of this parliamentary term?
Well, since teaching, training, and facilitation is really a passion of mine, I hope to play a role in developing talent in this province, mentoring young people to gain an interest in politics and supporting the existing structures of the DA to flourish there. I'm the head of a constituency in rural Mpumalanga, where the DA only has 2 councillors, as I've mentioned to you. And they're faced with unbelievable challenges when it comes to trying to serve residents in the area. So of course, I'm hoping to put most of my focus into really supporting them with driving the issues that they're driving at the local level, and also taking up their issues in Parliament and escalating them to a provincial, to our colleagues at the provincial level. So yeah, I guess the next 5 years are going to be incredibly interesting. In 2026, we have a local government election coming up. And South African political landscape is changing so much that there might be a few municipalities that we could govern with a coalition in our province. So I'm really hoping that we could put a lot of effort into developing our people to a point where they're a government in waiting.
I'm guessing as well one of the municipalities that could be the Democratic Alliance leading a government could be your home municipality where you were a councillor in our government in Mbeki. So I guess time will tell with the next elections, I think, which are in 2026. So we'll see. And I'm guessing as well, the Democratic Alliance is hard work, especially in this unity of government, which, is always a difficult sort of time, to work together with different political parties, which are so broadly different on the political spectrum. But I guess in a sense, being able to work with them and come with compromises should, hopefully get you guys awards in the municipality elections in the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Our ministers and our deputy ministers are working incredibly hard to showcase the DA difference. The Western Cape, that's been governed by the DA for a few years now, is really a long way from the other provinces in the country, and we're trying to bring that to a national level now. So we really hope that people can actually buy into the stark differences between the capability of a DA government, the endless possibilities of the future if we continue to rule where we are. And then, hoping that we can bring that to a local government level where people really, really, really need it. I mean,
Exactly.
that's really desperate situations exist. Just yesterday, entire farms actually burnt with wildfires in my local the municipality that I'm the constituency head of, and the municipality is so under-resourced. They just don't have the equipment and the means to look after this, that they're actually relying on volunteers to assist. And as a DA, we really want to change that situation. If you look at the city of Cape Town, where we actually have such a massive disaster management and emergency response operation that actually is linked to different parts of the country when they're in a situation of emergency. I guess that's just an example of the benefits of a DA government.
Exactly, and I'm guessing it as well. You've seen quite stark differences in DA governments and other governments across South Africa. I know, speaking to Matt Cuthbert last night, he was talking a lot about how the situation, especially in Johannesburg, which is quite a populous and very famous city for a lot of international viewers. It's been held hostage by from what he called very minor parties there with one or two members. It's really gone down in terms of being able to provide basic infrastructure, basic electricity, those sort of key things that especially for a viewer in Australia, would take for granted. It's really gone downhill, and it's really, really sad to see one of the great cities of South Africa going down that certain path, just because it's being held hostage, and corrupt mayors and municipality leaders have allowed that to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. The municipality where I was serving as a councillor a few years ago had debts towards our national electricity service provider, Eskom, of over hundreds of billions of rands that they owed these institutions, which just seems impossible to actually ever pay because of the mismanagement of the municipality that's just been looting public funds to an extent where they've started imposing over and above the load shedding that was imposed by Eskom. The municipality had actually started cutting off electricity for entire towns for hours on end, every day, because of failing infrastructure. And so that's a reality across many municipalities in our country, which of course we're always hoping to change.
Exactly, and it's a very key issue with electricity, which, in a sense, I think, is there a deputy minister now from the DA for electricity? I think that might actually be Samantha Graham. Correct me if I'm wrong, Siska.
That is
Yeah, so
Yes.
hopefully with her being on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time, we can maybe talk to her specifically about this issue, which is a really, really important issue. But yeah, hopefully better strides are being made in terms of this, and with I guess more people being informed and misinformation being brought down and more people getting education around political decision making in South Africa, you could start to see a huge amount of changes in terms of who's governing and the people that are actually being elected. Because at the end of the day, for especially that's why we started the podcast in a sense, allowing more people, especially young people, to be educated about who they're voting for is so crucial because at the end of the day, they're the ones deciding who's being elected. And if you're not politically informed and you're just ticking a random square on the ballot paper because you don't really care, you might be making a terrible decision, and you could be affecting the rest of your life in the next couple of years of if you're going to be able to get electricity or if you're going to be able to get key infrastructure within your local municipality or or anything really.
Yeah, absolutely. Political education is very important.
Really, really is. Yeah. So moving on then to our next question then for you, Siska. Who would you say is your political role model or idol? And hopefully you've had a good think about this because we've had quite a good number of political role models and idols been that are quite up there in terms of who would be expecting from previous interviewees.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, you can't be a South African without saying that, you aspire to lead in a similar way to people like Nelson Mandela. But one of the idols of our party actually is Helen Suzman. I don't know if anybody has mentioned her before.
Many people actually
She
have.
Right? So
Yes.
yeah, she's one of the political idols in our party, and I guess she was she was the only parliamentarian actually in during the apartheid years. Um, that consistently spoke out against apartheid. She really put a lot of effort into improving prison conditions for people that have been incarcerated because of apartheid. Like Nelson Mandela himself, they actually exchanged letters um, to each other during his time in Robben Island. So she was really like critical in terms of opposition during that really troubled time in South African political history. But of course, since becoming an activist for the DA, I've actually been surrounded by so many mentors in the party that I've always had these wonderful experiences that I hope to draw from and that have actually shaped the kind of leader that I want to be. And some of them are Helen Zille, of course, who's one of the more famous people in our party. She also has an incredible history of speaking out against apartheid, the injustices of the past, and also the injustices of the present. And another person that I really admire is the campaign manager for the last campaign, Greg Krambach, who's also been a politician in the party for many, 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 many years, and also been a political activist before that. Greg has actually, unfortunately, passed away very recently, but I was very privileged to work with him. I'm sure someone like Edwin had also mentioned him. And then someone who's really a stalwart from my province, his name is James Masango. And James had always supported me from my first day in politics, and I still phone him and we still speak. And he actually started off politics in the 90s in my hometown as a member of the DA, and being a Black member of the DA in 1994 or 1995 was, I'm sure you can imagine, had its difficulties. So James is really incredibly experienced politically. He's always been sort of a pillar of guidance for me. And yeah, I guess those are the role models or the idols that I can mention.
And Speaking of Helen Zille, I've actually reached out to her on the podcast. I think Chris Hutting gave me her number, so we'll see if she wants to come on. But yeah, she's a great political role model now, and I'm sure as well. There's so many great DA members and DA leaders over the past 20, and and speaking of there's so many great leaders of the party that you can name in terms of their fight, especially those who are part of the parliament during the years of apartheid, and those who were a part of the years now where you're struggling to you're struggling in a sense to actually provide better outcomes for all South Africans. So in a sense, there's a lot of great leaders of the DA, and it's great to see so many of them, and a lot of young people now, especially with yourself, Siska, and others who are following the footsteps of those great leaders like Helen Zille and all those around her in that time, and you're forging your own path, and hopefully maybe 40 50 years time the next generation of DA leaders will be looking at you guys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to also, to learn from people who have been in those
Exactly.
spaces. I mean, yeah.
And I'm being able to speak to them as well. I'm guessing as well with your local council there who was there in the 1990s. Being able to talk to them and being able to listen to their past experiences is so crucial, because sometimes as an MP, it can be quite a lonely place. You don't many people completely understand your job and completely understand what you do. So having those sort of people around you who have been through that and been through that experience, and speaking to them about certain issues is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've mentioned James. The reason, I guess, I can draw from so much of his experiences, apart from being, one of very few DA councillors in the 90s in the area where I come from. I mean, liberal politics post-apartheid was really just something completely brand new in our country, in a sense. And he served in local, provincial, and national government. He's been part of a leader in many different spaces. He's had so many different positions in the party and in government, or I guess in the opposition. That those kind of experiences are really critical to carry over to, I suppose, the next generation.
Exactly, exactly. And people like James especially are really, really important in for the future of the DA, and those, especially Helen's as well, telling those stories and being able to educate the young members coming through are so crucial, as we've previously said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then moving on to our next question then for you, Siska. So what made you run in the 2024 South African the national election, and what made you join the Democratic Alliance?
Well, I think I've shared a little bit of that story with you so far. I joined the Democratic Alliance. Well, I guess it was also a very personal choice. It was the only party that really aligns with my values and principles in South Africa. And I had this experience with my brother in the first election that I actually voted. I walked up to the voting station, and there's this table outside, and these two ladies with their DA t-shirts and the DA gazebo, and they're chatting with us, and they're asking me to take my name down, etc. And I thought that was the whole vote. I was like, okay, where's the ballot paper? And actually they were just being activists outside of the voting station. And so that was my first encounter, in the car on the way home after voting. My brother tells me, like, why don't you go into politics? And I thought, no, surely not. And a few years later, a friend actually recruited me into the party, and I started doing some volunteer work with him. Volunteering has also been something that's really important for me from a very young age. Contributing to society is something
Exactly.
that's really been kind of ingrained in me by my mother. And I suppose the DA really spoke to me, and it gave me a platform to pursue the things that I'm good in, and at the same time to contribute to my community. And that just kind of developed into this wonderful career that I've had so far. And I guess led to me running for the 2024 election. Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess in a sense as well, that that point from your brother, that statement from your brother really did I guess, inspire you to go into politics? And, talking a little bit about volunteering there as well, as a side topic as well. There's a lot of young people, especially now, I guess, in a sense, aren't as drawn to volunteering as, we used to be in a couple years back. Because, for example, with me, I try and be as politically active in the political party I'm part of here in Australia, but it's so hard to get young people to get involved in that sort of thing just because they think politicians are so far away from where they are in reality, and they don't see a full point in doing it, just because I guess time issues and that sort of thing. So really trying to, I guess, push young people, especially to go back into volunteering, whether that be in a political campaign, whether that be in a group setting, whether that be at a local church, whether that be in any sort of group environment, is so crucial to honing those communication skills and building up a profile which is better for you, not only talking to other people, but furthering your career in different senses. Because at the end of the day, communication and working together in teams nowadays is so crucial in any sort of work that you conduct.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it can never be understated.
So finally moving on to our final question here for Siska. So finally, Siska, this is probably our most important question on the podcast, so no pressure at all. What's some advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are starting university or high school, as I know they probably are now currently in South Africa?
Well, I was just still drawing from the previous question about, why I joined the DA, and, this question just sort of sparks something like about what motivates you to do what you want to do. I guess you have to find that thing, and for me, in my career, it's sort of changed over time. It's never the same thing. I started off just trying to want to speak out against, what I'm experiencing in my immediate community, but also what I've experienced in my life. I've had a lot of encounters with crime as a student, and so that actually led to me wanting to do something about it. And it's escalated or changed over time. And today I'm motivated to be here because I have a young child that I want to improve the country for. So I guess finding the things that motivate you, finding the reasons behind why you do what you do is incredibly important. And then on the other hand, also just never underestimating the power of your interests and the things that you find important and the way that you feel about things. I would encourage, the one piece of advice that I give to young people is to identify that and to pursue it, because you never know where it might lead you, and it's never not important. I think growing up in a community where there was such an incredibly hard focus at that age for me, to immediately decide what you want to be in life, you need to have this vision of what the next 40 years is going to be like, and it really sort of turns out exactly the way that it is in your mind, and you just need to kind of embrace whatever happens next, and just take the next step towards what makes you happy.
Exactly. And in a sense, don't put so much pressure on yourself in terms of figuring out what you want to do, whether that be after high school or at the start of university, because there's so many opportunities nowadays, to change degrees, change what you're studying. And, even if you complete a degree and, you work in the workforce, say, you work as an engineer for 5 years, but you figure out you're not actually capable, you don't really like doing what you're doing, you can always go back to university and study something else and begin a new career. Because, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be succumbed to sticking to something for 40 years straight, even if we're hating it at that point. So it's so important to have that open mindset and, don't be afraid to change things up and try new things if you're, not necessarily liking it and not enjoying it. Because at the end of the day, you in your working life, you're going to be working for about 50 years plus, and 50, 40 years plus. So it's really, really important to, find something that you enjoy. And if you don't enjoy something at a stage in your life, it's always okay to change and to study again and figure out what else you'd like, because we always have different changing needs and wants and what we aspire to be.
Absolutely. I mean, things, your circumstances and your interests and your, career is allowed to change as you move throughout life. And, you know, just only in the past like 10 years, my life, you know, actually it's been more than 10 years since I was in university, but my life has changed so dramatically. And, you know, my reasons for being have changed so dramatically. And so, you know, I'm actually looking back at myself thinking like, I'm not really sure why I was so incredibly stressed out about, you know, making these kind of decisions. Because, you know, opportunities will come your way and you need to do what feels right for you. And if it doesn't feel right anymore, then you need to make some sort of a change. And something that was really kind of you know, very sort of enriching for me to hear very recently. Our leader at a induction session, our party leader shared this message, and he was like, you know, he's not going to share a long fluffy story about, you know, self-help situations. He's only going to share with us a little graph, and the graph, let me
you've
just
got
draw it
a
for
little
you.
copy of it. You can actually show us the graph.
Yeah, well, it's not very complicated. It only looks like this.
Ah,
And he says, you know, in your life, there's going to be a lot of highs. You'll be here quite often, even in your career. You know, there's going to be a lot of things that make you feel really great, but then you're also going to experience a lot of lows.
Lows.
And whatever you do here is going to define, you know, how you get back up from it again. And you know, those are the times that really, I guess, define you. And it's incredibly important to also recognize and, you know, sort of try and be, I guess, emotionally mature in those times, in terms of the decisions that you make, so that you can, you know, pursue whatever gives you the next high point.
exactly.
So in the end, you know, life is not entirely about whatever your achievements will be at that stage, but it's more about the mundane kind of everyday experience that you have. You know, like I said, the things that interest you, the things that give you a reason for being. So yeah, that's
And
my advice in a nutshell.
and great for you to bring some psychological advice there as well, Siska, you know, coming from the background of psychology, and in a sense as well, you know, don't ever get succumbed and, you know, stuck in those low points in life, because there's always going to be high points in a sense, and, you know, finding something that can lift yourself up in those low points is so crucial, and it really does separate those who are, you know, in a sense, you know, inherently just, you know, pushing themselves down, and those who want to have a growth mindset and want to push themselves further. So everyone has low points, everyone has high points in life. It's just about how well you manage both of them, and, you know, come to expect both of them, because, you know, sadly we don't live in a utopia where, you know, everything is upsy daisy and happy all the time. You know, we go through low points as well. So it's important to expect them, but also work through those low points and try and work through those low points, but don't be too upset and too, you know, mundane and too angry at yourself if you're going through so many low points at a time, because eventually things will pick up again and you'll be excited and happy again.
Yeah,
Yeah, so those
exactly.
are all our questions then for you, Siska. I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and speaking to us. It's been over an hour, so it's been very, very enjoyable for hopefully for myself and our viewers, and hopefully for you too. So thank you again for coming on and telling us a little bit about your career before politics and some advice you give to students, especially those who are studying university and high school and starting this year, sorry, in 2024.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's been a really good experience, and I wish you just all the best.